Hello music students, today we're going to talk about the middle part of your practice session. So in another video we talked about the warm-up. In this video I want to talk about that middle part where you're working on the skill that you need to build perhaps for an upcoming performance or audition, or just that skill that you want to build long term so you can be able to perform those really exciting pieces that you would love to be able to play someday that are on your list. So I have a resource that I've used over the years for myself personally as well as for my student leaders, and it is from the military band's band handbook. I've got pulled up on my computer here. It's actually from the Army Band's Section Leader Handbook. And it shows in there some really good things to think about with practice. Individual practice. Here's a quote from Herbert L. Clark. Should certain exercises prove more difficult than others, work on these until they are thoroughly mastered. Do not waste time on those that are easy. Remember that to improve, one must master difficulties each day. And so another way to put that is I have a friend who plays professionally with Casey in the Sunshine Band, and he says, you know, if you're not playing, if everything you play sounds really good in your practice time, you're probably not practicing the right things. Some of the things that you need to practice on, you're not going to sound that great on. It's going to take a little bit of work to get there. So don't be afraid to meet that challenge. Another way that it's said by the guys who are at the brass gym is the law of accommodation. What's difficult today will be easier tomorrow. So the more that you work on it, the easier it gets. And so in the military band's band handbook, and I'll link the PDF to the video below, there's 3 types of practice they talk about. One is maintenance practice, for the trained player who has little time for individual practice but cannot afford to lose proficiency. And so for some of you, you have a pretty good mastery over your scales. And so you might be in the maintenance practice phase with your scales, or maybe even certain other things in your playing. Maybe when we get close to a concert, you're just in a maintenance phase with certain things. So that's that kind of practice, maintenance practice, especially scales is where I notice that when students have taken the time to really master those. The second thing is utility practice. This is what we engage in most of the time. Practicing because you know there's a playing test coming up or an audition or a performance and you've got to get that piece down. So that's called utility practice. And then the third type of practice, and this is really where if you have a private lesson teacher, especially a good one who's not just coaching you to be able to play your pieces for band so you can play the snot out of the third clarinet part to 3 pieces for MPA, but so that you really have an understanding of all of the different concepts on whatever your particular instrument is developmental practice, developing those foundational skills on your instrument. And so if you don't have a Rubank advanced method, or maybe some of you even an intermediate or elementary method, that Rubank book, especially the intermediate and the advanced method volume 1, take you through so many developmental things that it's just an incredible resource. And we're not going to have the time to go through that in band class, but individually, if you go through that with your private lesson teacher or on your own, it's just going to fill in so many gaps as a player, so that when you do have a difficult piece that you'd like to play or that gets presented in front of you, you've already developed the prerequisite skills to be able to achieve that at a high level. So as you approach your practice session today, I want you to think about the type of practice you're engaging in, especially with your scales test that's coming up next week. How many of those scales can you just maintain? How many of those scales do you really need to practice because you know that playing test is coming up? And then are there any developmental things that you need to work on that are exposed through the scales test? Like maybe if you're a brass player, you might have a difficulty reaching the high range. So maybe working on exercises that develops your range is a priority for you. Or maybe making sure that you are doing the right articulations, tonguing up and slurring down. Maybe keeping a steady beat, especially playing with a metronome and not rushing on the descending slurred part. So there's all kinds of developmental core concepts that can be exposed through the scales test. So think about what kind of practice you're engaging in and then do it to the best of your ability. I wish you the best of luck. I will do a help video specifically on scales tomorrow, but for today, this is what I want to talk about. So, all right, have a great one. Bye-bye.